You guys have heard me talk a lot about the Outlast Trials, and you maybe ask yourself why. Well, guys, this is one of my most anticipated games of next year, and I'm basically counting down the days until we get more information about this game. And look, we've gotten some reveals, we've gotten some, looks at the game, obviously, and I gotta say, I am just as excited. I mean, look, as a horror fanatic and a guy who absolutely loves the horror genre, between, the Outlast Trials, The Last of Us Part 2, Resident Evil Village coming out, all of these horror games are kind of setting us up for something that could be really special in the future. And like I said, I'm just really excited, to say the least, for some of these up-and-coming horror games, Outlast Trials being one of them. And in this last segment of the show, I want to talk about the top 5 things that we want in the Outlast Trials. And when I say we, guys, I'm going to be talking about myself here and my opinions. And of course, some of you may agree with some of my opinions. Some of you may disagree. I would love to know, though, whether you agree or disagree. In the comment section down below, what are your top 5 things that you want out of the Outlast Trials? So let's get into it. Coming in at number 1 for me, guys, is I really want the Outlast Trials, even though I know that this is kind of separate to that of the Outlast, of Outlast 1 and 2. This is kind of going to be its own story, even though it's set within the Outlast universe. It's not necessarily a direct continuation from Outlast 2. It's going to be kind of like its own thing. And so I love that concept. However, what I would like to see is for the Outlast Trials to tie into the original games in one way, shape, or form, kind of setting it up essentially for what's to come in Outlast 1 and 2, or some way or another we see some similar, familiar characters, whatever it might be. I just want them to tie into the original series in one way or another. That's my first one. My second is VR capability. And I've stated this in the past, guys. By the way, you can check out all of my Outlast Trials content here on the YouTube channel. One of the things that I've talked about a lot is that from the original posters that came out about the Outlast Trials, you saw the 3 characters that were wearing the goggles, right? And we know now that those were put on each character, and what we know is that they're like night vision goggles, right? But when that poster came out originally, the first thing I immediately thought of was VR. This is going to be a VR title in the Outlast universe. And we obviously, it's been said that it's not going to be that. The developers have stated that it's not VR, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that this is a game, after watching the game footage, looking at the posters and things of that nature, it looks like it's still primed for VR. And I've stated this in the past, guys, about Half-Life, and how everyone wanted a continuation of the Half-Life universe, but a lot of people weren't expecting it to be necessarily a VR title. We get the VR title, which was great. However, we would have wanted to also have it on PC and on consoles and such, which would have sold it really, even better, I believe, if they would have done that. And so vice versa in this scenario, we're going to begin Outlast Trials on, the consoles or PC at least. Having it on VR would also kind of cater to that audience as well. And I think that VR, the more it's been growing, this could be a horror game unlike any we've ever seen on VR. So I think that it should have VR capability. Coming in at number 3 for me, guys, is multiplayer and co-op. This is a game that looks like it is primed not only for VR as well as being on consoles and PC, and also having multiplayer aspects as well as co-op aspects. Obviously, guys, I want a full-fledged story and really dive into this thing, the horror elements and such. But for those of you, myself included, who love multiplayer as well as co-op, this is a great opportunity for the Outlast Trials to really be able to kind of set itself apart from other horror games, but it could also have similarities to games like Dead by Daylight, where it's like a 1v3 kind of scenario, or you are working with other people on your team to kind of solve a puzzle or, escape or whatever the case might be. It's primed for multiplayer, as well as co-op modes, in my opinion, where Obviously, guys, the Outlast Trials is being, it's being promoted as a co-op game. I think that it's going to be important that, those co-op elements are going to be within, the campaign, but also, we'll be able to do that with multiplayer and other ways in which we're able to connect with the universe. Because I think at the end of the day, guys, if you only have co-op, but no multiplayer, and it's a co-op campaign but not a single player campaign, you're kind of really it makes it difficult, because someone like myself, sometimes I like playing a campaign by myself and not playing with someone. I like, maybe if the other character is supposed to be a co-op character, or at least a playable character, I kind of like to have the option where it's just an AI character, and I'm able to go through the story on my own, and then I can go, play it again with my friends, or I can play with my friends in a multiplayer scenario. So having multiplayer, as well as those co-op modes, I think is going to be really important moving forward. And coming in at number 4, guys, for me, we've noticed so many times, time and time again, that this has happened in the horror universe, and I'll give you a couple examples here. What I want out of Outlast Trials is for them to keep horror over action. So, when I say that, I've said this on a number of occasions, guys, a lot of games, I shouldn't say a lot, but there have been games that have been ruined because it started as a horror game with action elements, and then as the game or series progressed, it turned from being a horror game with action elements to an action game with horror elements. 2 examples would be Fear and Dead Space. Both of those games started off as one thing, that being horror, and they kind of changed into action over horror, and now look at where those franchises are. They had 3 games and now they're done, and we're hoping that they come back at some point or another. There's no guarantee, though, that they're going to come back. So what I'm getting at here is the Outlast Trials needs to stick to what has made it so great in the past, that being horror over action. Having action elements is fine, guys. You got to have it in a horror game, but just keep the action secondary to the primary, that is the horror. And with that, guys, number 5, and this is a really important one to me at least, is I believe the Outlast Trials needs to set up this franchise for the future. So whether we're talking from a campaign perspective, moving in a direction of having, it tie into the original games, or it kind of they can build off of the Outlast Trials. They make the Outlast Trials 2, or they, do something along those lines where they set this franchise up for the future, that we get more games. Because once again, we had 3 games in the Fear franchise, 3 games in the Dead Space franchise. There's been, Resident Evil is one of those games that is almost unique to the horror genre, because we don't see a lot of games that get like 8 games in a franchise. So what I'm getting at here is, if Outlast is going to be a big franchise in the horror space for a long time, they got to set this thing up for the future in the Outlast Trials. Whether we're talking from a campaign perspective, leaving us on a little bit of a cliffhanger, or tying it into the original games, or it's just setting itself completely apart where it's going to be its own thing, having multiplayer elements within it that, whether those are free-to-play elements or whatever the case might be, having all of those different ways that you can connect with the franchise and building upon what they started with the first 2 games, I think this franchise could see, a lot of continuations and additions to the franchise. And so that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for, at the end of the day, guys, that we have a future in Outlast outside of just the Outlast Trials. I hope that this does well and that we get a continuation moving forward. But it really starts with having to set up the future for the series. But let me know, guys, in the comment section below, what are your guys' top 5 things that you want to see in the Outlast Trials? One of the honorable mentions for me would be free-to-play, or at least free-to-play elements, whether that be multiplayer or whatever. Like, if you have like specific co-op missions on the side outside of the main game or something, having free-to-play elements, guys, we see it so much in AAA games now. Having some free-to-play, game modes within the Outlast Trials could do really well as well, because people would at least try it out. That's another thing that would be really interesting. But like I said, guys, let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys want to see and what do you hope for out of the Outlast Trials? And for more The Outlast Trials content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.